Welcome back to Where in the World, where we have real conversations with young professionals about life and career, all while attempting to guess where in the world they are. We'll learn something new about our guests and what it's like to forge your own career path as a young professional. And when we say young, we're really talking about a state of mind. You'll learn by watching this web series that your career will take many dips and turns over time, and just when you think you've made it, you might have to scrap it all and start from scratch. Sometimes that's just the way it goes, and we ride the tide. I'm your host, Clary Johnson, and I'm joined here today by someone who has been in my corner since my OG corporate days. He is an instrumental part of my business transformation and someone I look forward to talking about all things mindset and spiritual fitness. We're joined today by Maxwell Darwin. Maxwell is a communications designer and content developer. He is currently the e-learning administrator for the County of Ventura. In his role, he is the primary developer of all e-learning content and oversees the county's learning management system. The big hairy question we're asking today is, how can young professionals use their minds to manifest their dream careers? But before we jump in, let's do some housekeeping. This is a mini web series game show. The questions will range from standard like interview questions to more personal questions about our guests' careers. You'll notice we're both here today with different backgrounds. In between questions, we'll each have an opportunity to guess where in the world the other person is. And the first person to guess correctly wins. Our guest can ask for clues along the way, and our audience can also join in and help out by also asking for clues. So please join me in welcoming Maxwell.
Hi, Claire.
Hello.
Thank you so much.
So, Maxwell, first, I want to say that you are so talented and multi-dimensional, which made crafting the questions for today quite challenging. Prior to this, we talked about a number of topics that we could touch on, including navigating your career as a contractor, working from home. But when I sat down to craft the questions, I really felt like I was missing the mark. So I went back to the drawing board with a peanut butter jelly sandwich in one hand and my laptop in the other. And I thought about our relationship and the ways that you've helped me get to the root of how I think and find alignment in my business. So, today we're going to be talking about how young professionals can manifest their dream careers by tapping into their mindset and belief systems. We're also going to touch on your experience as a contractor. And if we have a little bit of time, we may ask a question about the challenges of working remotely. So, this conversation might get a little messy, but I'm ready to start sorting it out. How about you?
Let's clean up that mess.
Awesome. So let's begin with our most common interview question, and that is, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sounds good. So, thank you so much, thank you so much, first of all, for having me on. I'm really excited to be here. And so, I guess my background just kind of goes chronologically. So, I went to school in about 2010, 2014. That was my college years. Went to California State University, Chico, graduated with a degree in communication design, graphic design, and instructional design emphasis. And then after college, went to work for American Honda Motors, where I worked for 5 years. Most of that time was spent as an in-classroom facilitator and instructional designer. Then I moved over to a startup company called Service Titan, and I was there for about a year and a quarter. And then now I work in the public sector, working for the County of Ventura. So all along these different career paths and this journey, I've had contract positions, I've had full-time positions, I've had position with a startup company, a government organization, and also with a large Fortune 100 company. So from a career standpoint, that's pretty much what I've been doing the last couple of years. And on a more personal level, I guess I would just say that I really enjoy getting a chance to explore what language means and how we communicate in the world, how we communicate with ourselves, and what does it mean to actually be in control or aware of the language that you use, even inside of your own mind as you speak to yourself during your day. So, thanks again for having me on. I'm really excited to dive into those topics.
Man, this is such an interesting topic about how we speak to ourselves, because one of the things I talk about is how when we give compassion to ourselves, we allow ourselves to give compassion to other. But it's the same with how we talk to ourselves. The way we talk to ourselves is also expressed in how we talk to others. And so it's so important that we really dive into our own minds and explore those thoughts and those belief systems that really activate our expression, and really take control of that and use our power to mold our language in a way that's going to really be positive and help us to manifest the careers and the lives that we want. So thank you for sharing. Let's take a pause, and we're going to guess where each of the other are, where each other are. I'm going to guess where you are, and you're going to guess where I am. Okay.
Okay.
So, tree of life. You okay, so you're by water,
Hmm.
and there's one tree here.
Hmm.
I don't see any other signs of life or vegetation in the area. So, I'm going to guess that you are somewhere in the Mediterranean.
I am not in the Mediterranean,
Wow. Okay.
but I'm excited to be able to share a story about this tree as we progress because I have been there and I actually took that photo.
That's a great photo.
That's not even the best one. I have a better one that I took, but it just didn't really work for this particular thing. So I'll send it to you afterwards, or maybe we can show it on screen in the
Absolutely.
edited version. Um, all right, can you move to the side so I can see the full picture, please?
But wait, no, 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 no. You've got to
Oh,
tell me the story. Like, I need a
oh
clue.
no, oh no. You'll figure that out throughout the hour as we go. I'll share a little bit more about the story, and then eventually those will be my
Okay.
hints.
Okay. Okay. So the hint is that you've been to this place and
I've
you took this photo.
I've been to this place. Yes.
Okay. All right. So here I am. Let me, here I am. Try to
Okay.
fade into the background a little bit.
So I don't have a lot to go on here. I have granite. The stone is granite. Wait, hold on. Can you move to the side? What's down here at the bottom of the
There's a
screen?
hole
Oh,
there with some
okay.
water in it.
Okay, that's not super helpful. Um, what's can you do this? Can I see? I want to see what's behind your head, really quick.
What am I doing?
Like just
Just ducking a little bit. Okay.
okay. You can come back. I'm going to ask a pretty broad question.
Okay.
Is this in the continent of Asia?
Let's find out. Is this in the continent of Asia? Oh, I'm almost positive the answer is no, but I want to make sure. Mhm. The continent of Asia. So I was correct in saying no,
Hmm.
this is not in the continent of Asia.
Okay. Hmm.
I'll give you a clue about
Okay.
this place. Okay.
Sure.
Um, so this place is the birthplace of Cyrillic script, which was created by two monks from Thessalon in the ninth century. So Cyrillic is the name of the alphabet of this place.
Cyrillic? Is it
Yes.
Cyrilic?
Yes, it is.
Is it Russia?
No. No, it is
Okay.
not Russia.
Okay.
Okay. Just to give you guys some context, before the show, I had a different background, and I asked Maxwell if he knew where I was, and he immediately stated where I was. So I had to go back to the drawing board and change my background.
she goes, "Do you know where this is?" And I go, "That's Machu Picchu." She's like, "Yep." I'm like, "Damn it."
Try again. Okay, so let's move on to our second question. You have had a colorful career, to say the least. You've worked as an independent contractor. You've also experienced the private sector and now the public sector. How would you describe your career in this moment and paint a picture of the path that brought you here?
Okay. I'm actually going to start with the past and then work my way to the present. So, when I first started working at American Honda Motors, I was a customer service agent and I didn't really have any customer service experience. And even more strange than that was I got hired on as a social media specialist. When I started, there was only a team of 5 people working for the Honda customer service team in social media. By the time I left, it was a team of at least 30 people.
Wow.
So when I got there, I was basically one of the starting online customer service agents. And I was there in that role for about a year and some change. And just got to know managers. That was like the main thing that I really did during that time was I got to know managers and supervisors. And to clarify, during this time I was a contractor. So what I really did during this time was I tried to set myself apart from the other people who were working, and I tried to volunteer for projects. Hey, if we have this project coming up, is there anyone who can help? I'm like, I want in. Let me be a part of it, because I learned really early on that the best thing I could do was show face. Because if I could get in front of managers, I knew that I could communicate with them well. And so from there, I ended up moving into a training type of role where I was the junior training and development specialist as a contract agent, and or as a contingent worker, whichever you prefer. Then from that role, I actually got promoted into the same exact position, but as a full-time employee with Honda. So we call that an associate position. But it was now just, rather than junior training developer, it was just training and training development specialist. And then when I left, my role had transitioned into instructional designer. And then I used language and internal manifestation stuff that we can probably talk about in the next couple questions to manifest my next job, which was with the company's Service Titan. And the reason that I did that was I was at the point where I was like, I'm not really fulfilled working at Honda anymore. This was the very beginning of COVID as well. So I just wanted something different. They had, at that time, they had moved all of the call center employees from Torrance, which was basically where I lived, to Chino, which was about 50 miles away. And so that added a 2.5 hour commute each direction on my day every single day. So I was like, this isn't cool. I'm going to find a new way to live my life. So I sourced the job at Service Titan, worked there for about a year and 3 months, and then I was let go. And during the time where I was let go, I went on vacation and I went to the place where I took this photo. And then I got a call. No, I'm sorry. I got a LinkedIn message out of nowhere from this guy, Tom Farish with Prosum. And he said, hey, I have a government position for you. And it's a contract position. Do you want it? And I honestly said no at first. I was like, government job, that's really not me. Like, I'm not really about that life. And he says, why don't you give it a chance? And I was in a part of my life where I was like, well, I don't have a job. And I had been doing a particular abundance and manifestation exercise called a Kriya. And I had been doing that every single day for several weeks at that point in time. And so I was like, okay, well, this is the universe's answer. This is the universe saying, here you go. You wanted a job? Here. And so I worked there from May of last year up until just earlier like the end of last month, where I then became a full-time employee. The interview process with them took about 2.5 months to go from interview as a contract all the way to being employed with the county. So yeah, that was a little bit long, but hopefully that gives a good scope of how it all worked for me.
And packed with so much juicy goodness.
Juicy goodness. Absolutely.
So one of the things you were talking about earlier which really resonated with me, is how you talked about your transition from contract employee into a full-time salary position.
Mhm.
And you talked about it a couple of times, but the first time you talked about it, you mentioned how you went about it, right? You saw these opportunities and you learned through experience that instead of just waiting for someone to come and say, "Hey, you're doing a great job. Do you want a job with us, a full-time job?" You raised your hand. You took ownership of your career development, and you found opportunities to be of value to the organization outside of your existing role. And that resonated with me as well, because that's also how I landed my first job, coincidentally or non ironically, at Honda. I was working as a student assistant associate. Sorry. I was working as a student associate when I began at Honda. I was working in the PR department. And I noticed that one of my colleagues, was doing something. She was working in the corporate communications department, and she had just had so much work on her plate. And one of the projects that she would work on monthly was something called a service anniversary, where we would go and we would interview employees about their careers at Honda. Uh, how ironic! That's kind of what we're doing here today.
Hmm.
I didn't make that connection until right now.
It's almost like you gained a skill set doing your early type of career work.
Oh, is that how that works? Um, so because I was, my background at the time was in journalism, but also in public relations. And so I had experience doing interviews, writing stories. And so I raised my hand to assist with this particular project. And as a result, when I graduated, well, yes, when I graduated from my master's degree program at University of Southern California, my student associate position at that time, it was up. I was no longer a student. I was no longer eligible to be in that role. And so then Honda, my management came to me and they said, "Hey, we're going to actually create a role for you within our department because we want you to stay." So that's so powerful. And it's actually something that I talk to the students that I mentor about. I know it's hard when you're coming out of undergrad and you're not quite sure about, you have these skills, you have this knowledge, but you don't you unless you've done tons of internships or have actually worked in a job, you don't quite know how to apply that yet, right? And so it's hard to come out of the gate saying, "Hey, I I want these types of these types of opportunities or these types of experiences, because I know where I want to be and I know that these types of experiences are going to help me get there." You don't know that yet, right? We're still formulating that in our minds. And so one thing that I always encourage is, if there is be observant in your role, right? So watch, look, listen, and raise your hand when opportunities arise. And even when there are seemingly no opportunities, we create the path. When there's seemingly no path, we create the path, and we raise our hands and we say, "Hey, here's a skill that I have. I would love to help you in this way." And so that was so powerful for me. And now I want to guess again where you are.
Okay.
Okay, so we are not in the Mediterranean.
We are
So I'm
not.
going to have to narrow us down by continent. Are we in North America?
You are not in North America.
Okay. I kind of guessed we weren't, but North America is very big. So I figured rule that out first and then go to the rest of the world. Can I get a clue
Yes.
about this place?
Yes. This country speaks Spanish.
Oh, I felt like there was a but coming in there.
No, I'm just being careful. I'm
Or
just
an
being careful.
although.
No,
Okay.
I think the I'll say I'll keep it as is. The inhabitants of this country speak Spanish.
Okay. Well, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Okay. Your turn.
You had mentioned that the language that was created there was Cyrillic, which is
Yes.
typically used in Russia, Ukraine, Slavic countries.
Okay.
And so I am going to venture a question.
Okay.
Have we ever gone to war with the country that is in? The United States? Have we ever gone to war with them?
Oh, let me check. By the way, Google is on limits for the show. Um,
On limits. Okay.
mhm. So I'm going to Google this because I'm not sure. Wow. This country declared war on the United States. Should I tell you when, or would that be too easy?
Give me the give me the 50 years that it happened.
In the 1900s.
Okay.
1900s, obviously, lots of years
Yeah.
within that realm. But
They
yes, this
declared war.
country declared war on the United States.
Okay.
And then the United States declared war on this country a year later.
Okay, so it's not Russia because you told me that before.
It is not Russia. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Mhm.
Oh, do you want me to guess?
Yes.
Is it a country that has the word Slavia or something like that in it?
You get a guess, Maxwell. You
Is it
already got the clue,
okay? Okay.
okay?
Is it Yugoslavia?
No, it is not.
It is not. Okay.
You're making me nervous, okay? You're making me very nervous. All right. So we talked a little bit about this, right? We've talked about the word contractor. Now I want everyone to know that the word contractor, um, and we're also going to use another term, which is contingent worker, and I think you may have also said that as well. Um, they're not necessarily interchangeable, but they're very similar. So I did some research ahead of this because I knew we were going to be talking on this subject. I wanted to make sure that we were getting the terms right. So what I found um, is that contractors are contingents, but not every contingent is a contractor. So contractors might also include part-time workers. They may also include on-call workers. So there is some nuance there. So I'm saying that to set up this question, which is, can you briefly describe what a contractor is in your own terms or in your own language? Because we're not talking about construction, okay? And some of the challenges that contractors face in the workplace when it comes to career mobility.
Definitely. I think that's a really important question, especially for young folks who are coming into the workplace. A contract employee is somebody who is not hired on officially with the agency, but their full-time workplace is typically that place, if that makes sense. So it's like it'd be like this. I'm corporation A, and I hire out to hiring agency B, and hiring agency B then hires out employee C. I don't, as the corporation, I don't pay the employee directly. I pay a particular amount, which is an agreed upon contract, to the agency, and then the agency then pays the employee a negotiated salary or hourly rate. So, in the content of my workplaces, I started work with a company called Aerotech. So I was an Aerotech employee, but I worked on staff at American Honda Motors. For my current role, I started at but I was on staff at the County of Ventura, and then the second part of the question was, what are some of the implications of being a contractor? Um, I would say, I'm going to say my honest answer, and that is that there's actually some stigma around being a contractor. I've heard from many people that they feel like it's worse. Not, I don't necessarily know if that's true, because there's different benefits and different things that are better for each. But I have heard people say this. I've heard people say, when I'm a contract employee, I don't necessarily feel like the culture, or I don't really feel included with everything that happens at the primary office. And the reason for that is there's a legal precedent that you have to technically treat contract employees differently from full-time employees. I don't really understand why, but you can't give the contract people the same thing that you can give to the full-time employees. Um, so where do you want me to go from there, I guess?
And then I guess the third part of that question was, so you talked about some of the challenges. How does that translate into career mobility for
Hmm.
someone who is in a role as a contractor or contingent?
Okay, that's a good one. Um, I can't speak for the entire industry, but I can definitely speak to my experience. I have found that for a contract employee, you are fairly limited in your ability to move around in the company. In all three of the companies I've worked with, if you were a full-time employee, you had more opportunity to apply for different departments and different types of roles. I've noticed that with a contractor, you're kind of in a lane in a way, and you have a cap, because essentially the contract can only be negotiated so far by the external agency, and oftentimes they're on a time limit. So um, for some jobs, it's like it's a 6 month contract, which means we'll use your services for 6 months, and then if we still think you're doing a good job and we still need you after the 6 months, we will renegotiate with the agency. The other type is you're essentially a permanent contract employee, which is, I think, what contingent means, is you work here contingent upon the situation that we still need you. So as long as you're not fired, or as long as we don't have layoffs, we don't have any reason to let you go. That's kind of my understanding of what a contingent means. And so if you are in the contract type of field, one limitation is your contract might end.
Mhm.
The other thing is there might only be a certain type of roles that were negotiated from the beginning. So, like for example, with Honda, one of their contract things that they negotiated was for customer service, was they negotiated inbound agents, so people who take phone calls, and then they negotiated case managers, and then they had a very small allocation of headcount for people who were like mediation specialists, or some other form of customer service thing. But that was only within that one department. So if you were trying to move outside of the department, you couldn't do it as a contract employee. You would have had to do it by applying in a full-time role with Honda, or with finding a different agency that worked with a different department. I think that is a pretty good assessment of how your career could be contained.
And that's an excellent rundown, an excellent description of a role as a contractor. So I've never worked as a contractor before. I guess you could argue now in my business, I work on a contract basis, but I would be more my business would be more considered as a supplier than a contractor. And there are big differences there, right? So my clients don't pay me benefits, right? I'm responsible for my own benefits. Now, if I were to work through an agency, that agency, if it's a good agency, would pay my benefits, right? Um, and so there are some very legal implications to how the company can show up for contract employees. And I'm very intimate with this language because working in corporate communications, we were always writing around this, right? If we were doing a giveaway at the
Hmm.
company, we weren't allowed to give gifts over certain dollar amounts to contract employees. Um, and while that in itself is not always, it doesn't on the surface seem like a huge hurdle. I think when we talk about some of the more personal elements, some of the things that you were getting into about how am I treated in this work environment, it becomes a huge issue. And because the company is legally required to treat the contract or contingent worker in a different way. And that seeps into the culture of how full time employees treat contract workers. And I think when we talk about career mobility, yes, there is definitely the logistic element of that, of, you know, types of jobs that you can apply for if you want to come on board as a full time employee, how you have to go about that process. But there's also this element of how your peers see you. Like if I'm a contractor and I'm going up for a full time role, and my peers have this impression or this idea of me as that contingent worker, as that contractor, how is that going to influence the way that they perceive my interview? It's going to be very different, right? And so I'm so happy to have you on the show because I believe it's so interesting, and we're actually going to get this into this in the next question. Um, but contract work and contingent work is such a it's so prevalent. Yet you don't and unless you've worked in a corporate environment, you don't hear about it or see it, or unless you're applying for jobs, you don't hear about it or see it or really know what you're getting into until you see it,
Mhm.
until you encounter it. And um in my experience, it's always been one of it's always been a challenge that I think employees, contract and contingent employees, um, and even full-time employees who support contract and contingent workers. It's a challenge that I don't know has been really resolved. And I know that typically corporations will pay contract or pay agencies for contractors because it's cheaper labor. Um, it's a lot easier for them in terms of hiring, right?
Mhm.
So I don't necessarily have to, pay recruiters to go and recruit this talent when I can just go to an agency and the agency has already done the hard work and all they're doing is supplying the worker, right? So or the talent. So I think it's a very touchy subject. And I don't know if you can tell by my language. I'm really trying to toe the line and be respectful about it because I know from a business perspective as a businesswoman that hiring contractors, and just to be fully transparent, my entire team is contractors, right? I don't even pay myself a salary yet.
Mhm.
So technically I'm a contractor um, of my own business, broadly, right? But so I understand, right, why a business would hire contractors. At the same time, it's to me it's very similar to internships and how I think there's definitely a gray line where you lean so much on internships and contractors that really does become an ethical question about your treatment of that class of workers, right? Um, it, because in a lot of times, and what I've personally noticed is contractors do a lot of work. It's not like they're coming in and doing. I mean, a lot of times they're doing the things like customer service. They're doing. They're taking on roles that maybe not everyone has an interest in, right, like the kind of the dirty jobs, but at the same time those tend to be the hard jobs.
Mhm.
Right. And so and sometimes when you look at their workload in comparison to a full-time salaried employee, it's very similar, right? And even when you look at I've known contractors, and I won't say at what company, but I've known contractors who's like, hey, I've been a contractor for 12 years. Like, what? how have you been a contractor for 12 years? Yeah, I've applied many times for a full-time position and I've never been hired, but I'm but you're g- but so you're not qualified enough for a full-time role, but you're qualified enough to be a contractor for 12 years. Something's not adding up there. So it is a touchy subject, but it's something that we definitely want to expose because, as you mentioned, if you're graduating and you're going into the workplace, this is important stuff for you to know when you're applying for jobs, and when you're taking the time to really map out what your career looks like. So I hope that was comprehensive. Okay.
Okay. If I want to add just one quick comment onto that, and it was something that I was thinking about within the first 5 minutes of this, and it was this idea that when you're going into your first job, or actually even before that, when you're choosing your major, you're it's a little stressful to think about, but you're literally picking out your entire future. Because once you have a major, it's very likely you're going to get a job in that field if your degree is in alignment with what your career is. So like I look back on my college career, and I often think like, man, if I could go back and change my major, I would have gone into marketing and journalism,
Hmm.
and learned my writing style more than graphic design. Um, and the reason for that is when I really think about myself now, 10 years later, I'm really, really good with language. I'm like great with words. I'm when I took the SATs, I had like near perfect scores in English language.
Well,
Um, but I'm actually only like a pretty okay designer. You know what I mean? Like when I was in graphic design school, there were so many designers in my class who were just way better than me and way, way more efficient with their drawings. Like way, like their drawings, their work just looked cooler. I was like, wow, like this is just better design. And so the reason I bring up all of this is just to like, if you're going into college or you're in college and you're not sure about your major, it's definitely worth really putting some thought into, because once you get your first job, as Claire mentioned earlier, now all of a sudden you have 2 years of experience in this thing. What are you going to do? Are you going to start a brand new career in a completely new field and take less pay? Maybe, but more likely than not, you're going to keep going in this general direction. Like I went from junior trainer to training and development specialist to instructional designer. Now I'm an e-learning developer, e-learning admin. So you can see how they're all kind of related. It's all learning and development in one way or another. But once you choose a field, you're kind of there unless you really want to take a left turn in your life and like, all right, I've been a trainer for 6 years. I'm going to be a content manager, social media manager, or a community manager. Like that's a 90-degree angle of what you were doing before. So just something to keep in mind.
and that's something we talk a lot about when we talk about resume writing, is transferable skills, right? And so one of the things I stress to my students is think about what you want to learn, right? Think about what you're good and we use this term, it's called ikigai, which is also appropriate for the conversation. We mentioned Honda a lot. It's a Japanese company. So ikigai is a model or method for finding your purpose, and it's a method that evolves over time. I don't think you ever look at this method and you're like, "Oh, I've figured out what I like to do, or what I'm passionate about, what I'm good at, what the world needs, and what I can get paid for." I think those elements evolve and transform and reveal themselves over time. But I think we do need to look at the full picture, versus this idea of just doing what we think society wants us to do, right? Oh, I'll just go be a doctor or a lawyer or a dentist or a mathematician or a professor because those are the things that society says are what I should be doing and what I get praised for. Like, no, really take the time, right? Do the mindset work, really get to the root of what you want, what you're passionate about. And if you don't know, that's okay. But then take some steps to find that out, right? Um, but I think what you're saying is so important because at some point you may want to pivot, and your ability to pivot is going to be very dependent on those transferable skills. that you've picked up along the way. So, really, really great points there. I'm going to guess where you are now because we're in a Spanish speaking country. Are we in South America?
I'm going to give you the hint answer. Technically, it's Central America.
Oh, okay. That's a good hint answer. So you said technically though.
It's very close to South America.
Okay, so it's Central America close to South America.
I mean, there's a lot there.
Okay. All right, it's your turn.
You have to guess.
Oh, I mean it's wait, I didn't guess. Oh,
You
I
didn't
guess.
guess.
Well, I did guess. I said, well, I asked a question. You're
You asked the
right.
question.
I
So
more
yeah,
so asked for a clue. All right, so it's Central America close to South America. Are we in Panama?
we are not in Panama.
Okay. Well, I can only go north from here. So,
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Okay. Hold on. I'm going to use a map really quick. Okay. So it's a Slavic country.
Mhm.
Is the Slavic country currently at war?
Let's find out. Question is,
You're wondering why I'm asking war questions. It's because historically I can figure it out from that.
so I'm going to say no. This
Okay.
country is not at war. So we are not in Ukraine, if that is.
Yeah, I was going to ask what's Ukraine. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, I'm going to ask a. No, I can't ask another question. I have to guess.
Mhm.
So, is the country um, sorry, my mind is like blanking right now. Are you in Croatia?
We are not in Croatia, but I will give you a clue
Okay.
about this place. Okay. So, and I'm going to give you a clue about the specific place that I'm in.
Okay.
Okay. So, the ancient sanctuary where I'm at is one of 3 points forming the strongest energy zones in Europe. I'll repeat that because I've flustered over my words. The ancient sanctuary where I'm at is one of the 3 points forming one of the strongest energy zones in Europe.
Okay. That is not helpful at all. I'm like looking at a map of Europe and I'm like, I have any clue.
Where these energy zones are.
I don't
The,
like. I don't want to just Google energy zones in Europe because it's going to give me the answer. But I'm also like,
okay, so we will move on to our
okay,
next question. So here's a statistic. There were 51.5 million contingent workers in the United States in 2020. This is according to a report released by staffing industry analysts. They represented 35%, and by they, I mean the contingent workers, of the nation's workforce and generated $1.3 $1 trillion in revenue. What is your reaction to these numbers?
I mean, it's kind of just like, yeah, that makes sense. It's like when I think about, I guess when I think about it this way, I've been looking at LinkedIn postings recently just to try to just to see what's out there with all the layoffs happening. I'm kind of like, how many people are applying for jobs? What jobs are happening? What jobs are available? And the numbers that you just mentioned sound about right with what I'm seeing on hiring pages. I would say probably about 35 to 45% of the postings I see are contract employee positions. And so, yeah, I can't really say I'm like surprised that the trillion wasn't even surprising either. I'm like, if it's 35% of the workforce, yeah, that's a huge amount of money that we're producing in GDP. So yeah, that makes sense. Nothing really more to it.
Yeah. I mean, it was pretty staggering for me. I mean, I'm familiar again with contract workers and how big of a impact that they make on corporations. But when I really look at the overall scope of the United States and our economy, $1 trillion is pretty um, is a substantial contribution. And so it just, to me, there's such a contrast between the contribution that contractors make and the treatment of contract employees, if that makes sense. And so I wonder if contractors or people who are in those positions, and I imagine that there a lot of them are and on the spectrum of age ranges, probably from, very young to more senior. But I wonder if they even realize the contribution that they make. I wonder if how many really recognize their value and their worth. Now, with that being said, just because you're a contractor or contingent worker doesn't mean that you're doing that, you know, you're doing that because that's the only option that you have. There are people who choose contract work as a lifestyle, as a valid lifestyle, because of the flexibility that it offers, right? Because I'm not attached to this company, I can do work other jobs, I can supplement my income in other ways, I can start my side business and still work as a contractor. So there is still some very valid reasons for um, holding on to a contract job. But when I think about it, I wonder. It's interesting because as a contract worker, technically you're self-employed. Unless I guess you work for an agency, but technically when you file your taxes, am I saying this right? Like when you file your taxes, is that correct? Wrong?
When
Yes.
I was with both of my contract companies, I was a W-2.
You were a W 2
Yeah,
under the contract company.
under Aerotech and Prosum.
Okay.
So I think technically that would not be self-employed
Okay.
because you have a tax statement that comes from the organization.
The organization. Okay. So, but I know that and again, contingent worker is very broad. So there are some types of contingent working, like freelancing, where you
Mhm.
are
Mhm.
self-employed. And that also fits into that $1 trillion, to be very clear, right?
Got it.
So I think about, and we're going to get into this, the entrepreneurial mindset that as a contract employer, if that's the direction or the path that you choose, then you already have some element of wanting to work for yourself. And so I wonder, what is it that's kind of keeping you from taking the total leap of just starting your own business versus saying, okay, well, I'm going to be a contract employee because I love the flexibility that it gives me to be able to work at many different jobs and have many different side hustles, to saying, well, why don't I just work for myself, right? Completely. So I just find that it's a really interesting kind of a dynamic and a lifestyle for those who choose that as a path, as a career path. Um, okay. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I would actually say I don't necessarily agree with that.
Hmm.
Because when I first started working at Honda, I wasn't focusing on my entrepreneurial side at all.
Hmm.
I was actually looking for something stable and secure. This was when I
Interesting.
was 20, 23, 22. I was like 22 years old, 23 years old, somewhere around there.
Hmm.
And it was around this time that I had, I lived, graduated college and was living with my parents for a while. So at that point in time, I wasn't really focusing on trying to build my own business. And I was just going in, as some people might say, to like, for the security of like, I know that I have this job and it pays me 40 hours a week. I don't really have time for a side hustle, or at least back at that time, I wasn't really pursuing it.
Hmm.
Um, so I think that just something to be conscious of is just the fact that there's such a vast spectrum of what contracting really is. I mean, there's contract full-time, contract part-time, contract almost no time at all, help, like only special help needed. We only need you for 3 hours a week. That's technically still a contract position. Um, it's like a freelancing thing. But, I think that what a lot of people who are in contract roles are doing is they're specialized in a certain type of work. And I actually wanted to say this earlier, but I didn't think of it in the moment. But the world needs contract workers. If all the contract workers just like quit right now, the economy would just stop. And this is because a lot of the roles, like customer service people, a lot of those types of, I guess you could call them entry level positions, um, typically held by younger people. Those positions really hold the underpinnings of a lot of businesses and a lot of companies. A lot of people don't really see that, but it's like if these contract employees just disappear, you're kind of left like out of water. You don't really have a complete workforce. So it's like these days the workforce has changed over the last 50 years. It used to be that it was like you'd go work for a corporation, you'd get a pension, and you'd stay with that company for 40 years. These days people move around a lot, and people need to have the ability to, as you say, have the freedom to move around. Because there is a different mindset. Once you're a full-time employee with a company, something does change, and you're like, oh, maybe I should stay here for a couple of years. Um, maybe I'll get those. Maybe I'll get the 3 years. I'll stick around because I get vested at 3 years. So I'll stick around for that long. When you're a contractor, you don't really have any of that sort of thing. Maybe you don't have a 401k, or you don't have a vesting, or no equity, that sort of thing. So you have, as you said, more opportunity to be like, well, I've received what I need from this place, so I'm going to take my skill set somewhere else that either pays me more or is it more in alignment with what I want to do. Those are like typically your two options.
Hmm. Yes. And so that brings us to our next guest.
Okay. Transition.
Yes. Because I really want to find out where you are.
Okay. If
So
you.
we are in Central America,
Mhm,
close to South America, but not quite.
mhm.
We are not in Panama. Are we in Salvador?
Think bigger than El Salvador.
Bigger than El Salvador. Okay. So I have
Actually, hang on. Hold on. I need to look at
three
a map really
options.
quick. Well, I'm going to make sure I'm not leading you down the wrong path here.
I mean, El Salvador is pretty small in comparison to the neighboring countries. So,
All right, I want to confirm that I'm not like totally leading you down the wrong path here.
okay.
Okay.
I have to check
Um,
that.
Definitely bigger than El Salvador.
Okay. Definitely bigger.
Not. It's not the biggest, but it is bigger.
Okay. Am I close in proximity?
Uh, I mean, there's only 6 countries in Central America, so sure,
And I've already guessed two of
two
them.
of them, and it's not Belize because Belize is the same size as El Salvador. So you got about 4 more choices.
All right.
um, are you in Czechoslovakia?
I am not in Czechoslovakia.
Well, I probably should have asked for a hint before that, huh?
Well, I'll give you a hint.
Okay.
This country has more than 350 monasteries.
Monastery. Now, monastery would be specifically just any type of temple, or is it a Christian temple?
Orthodox Christian church.
Interesting. Okay. That still
Located
doesn't
in
really
remote
narrow it down a
areas
lot.
surrounded by beautiful nature.
I'm like, yeah, but like all Slavic countries are Christian countries for the most part. I mean, unless you're talking about like Kazakhstan, but Western Slavic countries are pretty much all Christian. Well, I already guessed.
Would you like to ask for a different kind of clue?
Sure. Let me. Okay, I'm gonna ask a geographical question.
Okay. By the way, I'm pretty impressed by your knowledge of geography and of history.
Okay, so in the map of Slavic countries,
Mhm.
there's like 20.
Okay.
So is the country north of Hungary?
No, it is not.
It is
This
not.
country is not north of Hungary,
Okay. Um,
nor east, because you already guessed.
is it?
Mhm. You already did you guess already?
I guessed Czechoslovakia,
Okay. Oh, okay. Okay.
which technically doesn't exist anymore now that I'm looking at it.
Mhm.
But yeah. So back to the other thing.
All right. That's your guess?
Czechoslovakia would be
All
my
right.
guess, right? Unless I can get a
Okay.
second guess, I'll take a second guess.
Mm, you would like that, wouldn't you?
I would
Okay.
like that. I would like that.
So, tell us about a time when you used your mental power to manifest an outcome in your career. What did you manifest? How did you manifest it? And what was the result?
You know, it's funny. I like sit back and I think for a second, not because there's so few of these, but like because there's literally so many of them. I was doing this before I even knew that I was doing it. Um, I'll give the most conscious attempt at this. When I was transitioning from American Honda Motors to Service Titan, I how would I even say this without getting woo woo? This is going to be woo woo because it is. It doesn't make sense. Like it literally like doesn't make sense. I was getting to the point in my career at Honda where I was unhappy. I was basically fed up with the way that things were going. I didn't like that they forced everybody to move, including myself. I didn't like the way that we were treating our customers at the time because of factors related to COVID and certain other things. So I was like, okay, I just need to find something else. And so I start looking and I start going on LinkedIn or whatever. And I see this posting. And I think if I remember correctly, I think I had ignored it. And then it kept coming up. Like I would like see it over and over and over again. And I hope I'm not mixing up two stories, but I think what happened was I had submitted an application and then a recruiter had reached out to me from that company, I think like the same day or something like that. It was some weird circumstance where I had agreed with myself where I was like, yeah, you know what? I am going to apply for that job. And then someone from the company like reached out to me. I think that's what it was. And the reason that this all seemed to have happened was on the back end. What I mean by that is like behind, out of the office, I was literally doing prayer. I was doing mantra. I was doing sigils. So I was like writing down a phrase. I wrote down, I work at Service Titan. And I had written
Wow.
it in this like crazy language that I draw. Like it kind of just looked like a drawing. It didn't look like words anymore. And I had that in front of my desk at work.
Wow.
And I had mentioned earlier something called Kriya. So there's a particular Kriya called Sobag Kriya. And it is an energetic practice. Basically, it's a meditation, breath work, and mantra and mudra practice. So you do certain movements, breaths, and words, and you do them every single day with devotion, no matter what. and it moves energy. Like it's hard to explain because it's like it just works on a spiritual level. It does something. Like I don't really know how to explain it, but it just does something. And so I was doing that every single day. I was literally speaking it into existence. I work at Service Titan. I work at Service Titan. I wasn't thinking about I want to work at Service Titan, or I hope I get the job, or I hope I'm offered the position. I was adamant and declaring, living in the space of I already work there. That was the main mindset switch. Was like I already have this job. I'm the perfect candidate for this job, and they couldn't possibly pick anyone else because this is my job. And that's kind of the mindset I was going into it with. Was like I already have it. And so yeah, that was I know that there's a lot there. There's a lot of things that were going on then, and trying to remember all of it is kind of crazy. But yeah, that's happened. That happened that time, and then also similarly with the other job as well. So
And I want to tell you that sure, maybe for some it sounds woo woo, but for me, it does not sound woo woo. I the thing that I connected with most about what you said is how you manifest. And you talked about manifesting by being very direct and specific and assured about the direction you were moving. I remember on many occasions in my life when that was true. So, for example, when I was graduating from the University of Illinois, I knew I wanted to go to the University of Southern California, but my GPA was not a University of Southern California GPA at the time. It wasn't, I didn't have a bad GPA, but it wasn't USC grade GPA. And I remember talking to a peer and saying, I'm going to go to USC. And that person said to me, well, don't you realize that that's one of the hardest schools in the nation to get into? And I said, yeah, and I'm going to go. And this person actually bet that I wouldn't get in. And so I had already declared it, even though hadn't even applied, even though I knew my GPA wasn't where it needed to be. But then after that, I took some very specific steps to get to where I wanted to be. So the first thing that I did was I found a contact at USC and I reached out to them. And his name was Jerry Swirling. And he spent an hour on the phone with me answering all of my questions. And I just thought that was really amazing to do at such a high level in that organization. The second thing that I did was once I had applied for USC, mind you, I had wanted to apply to several different schools. University of Miami was on one of them, USC was the other one, but I only had enough money for one application. And so I put it on USC. And then when I applied, I reached back out to my contact and I told him like, "Hey, I'm getting ready to apply," because I know he was on the admissions board. And I enjoyed our conversation. I wanted to let you know my application is in. And so when I got the acceptance letter, I was thrilled, but it also was no surprise to me because I had done the work that I needed to do to fulfill that manifestation, right? Um, but it started with that unwavering belief that it was going to happen,
yeah,
right? Same thing with Google. I had declared Google before it even happened. I said, I'm going to go work at Google. And my best friend can attest to this and talks about it often. Remember you said that and then it happened? I'm like, yeah. Um, so there is so much power, and when we talk about um, language, right, as a linguistic alchemist, there's so much power in our words, in our thoughts, which translate into our verbal expression, and so that's why it's so important for us to really like harness that and dive into it and really find the power where sometimes we feel really powerless, right? Sometimes we feel really powerless about our careers if we're in a situation where it doesn't seem like there's much wiggle room to grow or space to grow, right? If there feels like there's so much red tape around my career development and how far I can go, we can feel powerless, like we're not in control. And so this conversation really is about how can we find that control? Like, how can we, or it may not even the control, because I think that's such a strong word, but more so, how can we find our power? And how can we empower ourselves from the inside out to achieve our idea of success?
I have a lot of cheat codes for this. I love that you brought up the
Share
linguistic
them all.
alchemist, because I was totally going to if you didn't. So I want to address what that is. Linguistic alchemist. As I was coming into this meeting, I was like, "What do I write here?" And I was like, "I'm just going to put what I have as my Instagram like thing, my little like bio on Instagram." A linguistic alchemist is a term that I created. It's not like a thing in the world. I'm like, that's what I am. It's the word is linguistic, means language. Alchemist is like a magician or somebody who transmits one thing into another. So as a linguistic alchemist, what I'm referring to is I'm somebody who takes the language that we're given, culture, society, your upbringing, and take control, as you said, or be aware of how that incoming information goes through your mind and interacts with who you are, who you be, what you are, what you be. Like, right? Like, it's kind of a cliche, but the universe as it's happening is happening within your head, in the sense that you're the middle. I've said this for years. It's like, it doesn't matter if you went onto a boat in the middle of an ocean and look around. You're the middle. Everything's happening to you because you're the center of attention. And so when I address language and how you use language as a tool, it really starts from the place of awareness. There's this unconscious story. Let's call it that. There's an unconscious story within most of us that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, someone else would probably do the job better. Going back to what I said earlier when I was like, like there were other graphic designers who were better than me. That is like objectively true, right? Because I could look at their work and they would get better grades than me. Like, they just were better designers. But when you talk about something like applying for a job, all of the things that are in your head about like, well, I'm probably not going to get this, there's other people who are more qualified, all of that's all inside your mind. All of that it's subjective. It depends on the person who does the interview whether they want to hire you or not. Most jobs these days will even post, not every one of these qualifications is a requirement. If you meet some of them and we like your personality, you're probably going to be more suited for this job. I remember my manager at Honda /Aerotech. His name was Wes Beck. He ended up being a recruiter for Facebook and was had worked up in the Meta company, but he had told me that there are good people for a job, there is a great person for a job, and then there's the perfect person for the job. And then on top of that, one level higher there is the complete person for the job. So he says, you may not be the perfect applicant, you may not be the best qualified applicant, but if you are the most complete applicant and you really fulfill the role in all of its ways, you fulfill the role culturally, you fulfill the role in all different types of alignment, experience, personality, and so on. I'm digressing a little bit, but I want to kind of bring it back into this. If you really align with a job and you're like, man, this job resonates with me, this is so me, and you can imagine yourself being in that role, that's what I would suggest you do. Imagine yourself as though you are already in the role, and think about your day as though you already work there. Now, there's a really important distinction I want to make before I pass it back over to you, and that is that there's a big difference between the law of attraction and the law of manifestation. The law of attraction states that whatever you want in the world, you wish it and it becomes so. That's not necessarily the case. The law of manifestation states that which is in the world can be yours as long as you desire it, and also as long as you take action toward that result. And so if you just sit in a black room meditating your way into $1 million, well, it's never going to happen. you have to do things like what Clary said, where she reached out to the Office of Admissions, she found a contact, she had a conversation, she let that person know what her personality was like and who she was.
Mhm.
And by seeing who she was, that person on the board said, this person is USC material.
Mhm.
And that's kind of the mindset you need to have. Even if you never have a second interview with somebody at a job or whatever it is, you see if you can align yourself and the way that you are, or the things that you do to be you, you see if you can align that to what is the company's direction and how does my role as the person who's hired in that role, how do I contribute to that company? And you go from there. You come from the place of confidence. I already have this job, as though you're already getting a paycheck for it. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
The word for me was alignment. And you touched on something, and literally today I was meeting with one of my students, and the exercise that I had her do was last week she made a list of top 10 companies that she would want to work for. Or the previous week she made that list. Last week I said, okay, now what you're going to do is you're going to go to each of these companies' websites. You're going to read their about statement. You're going to visit their career site. You're going to read what they say about their company culture. You're going to read their diversity and inclusion statement. You're going to, if they're a public company, you're going to look up their public information, their investor reports, and you're going to read through those. You're going to read through the job descriptions and find jobs that feel in alignment with who you are. And then we're going to come back and we're going to have a conversation about what things is really stood out from you in your research that felt in alignment with your personal values. Because it is so important that we do this research on the company that we want to work for. And I understand it can be really frustrating, especially now. And even today, when we were looking for jobs, I was like, oh my goodness, it's so hard right now because people are getting laid off, right? Meta just laid off 10,000 or just announced 10,000 more layoffs. And people are afraid to hire because of the economy. And so if you're graduating right now, like if you're getting ready to graduate in a few months, it's it, it's an interesting world to be in as a job applicant. And I'm curious as to kind of how that's going to pan out. But so I understand when you're in this place and you feel like you feel unsure about what your next step is going to be. And then you feel this panic and this anxiety about, oh my goodness, am I going to get the job that I need? Am I going to be living with my parents forever? Right? Um, or maybe that's not even an option for you. Do I have to go to the military? Right? Like these are the kinds of real questions that we're battling. And so I understand from that perspective, it can feel like, okay, I just need to apply to anything and everything. And let me just get something. Like, let me just get something. But I really urge you to slow down, practice manifestation, practice seeing yourself, as Maxwell said, in the position or in the role that you want to be in. Study the company that you're applying to and make a decision about whether or not that company aligns with your values. And even if there is not a role for you at that company right now, you're planting the seeds for that opportunity to attract that opportunity in the future when it becomes available to you, right? Um, and so that is going to actually lead us into my next question. But before we do, we're over an hour and we still haven't figured out where each other are. So we got to speed this up a little bit.
Okay.
Okay. But before we do that, you promised that you were going to give us some stories about this space, this place that you've been, and I haven't heard any stories yet.
So the place that I went to was for a wedding. And when I went to this wedding, this was for a group of influencers. So a lot of people who were really big on YouTube, really big in the influencer space, would be at this wedding. The two people who were getting married were Louis Cole, who is Fun for Louis on Instagram. He has over 1 million followers. And then his wife, Raya. And she also has, like 700,000 or over 1 million followers, something like that. And so, as you can imagine, a lot of their friends are other influencers. So I went down to this country for 9 days or something like that. And while I was there, I traveled to 3 different areas of one state, and we stayed in 3 different areas. And I'll give you a big clue here. One of the places I stayed is one of the largest and most sought after yoga retreat centers in all of Central America.
Okay, I wasn't gonna guess this because I just felt maybe it was too obvious. Are you in Costa Rica?
I am in Costa Rica.
I wasn't gonna guess it, Maxwell. I said I'm not
Now,
gonna do it. It's too obvious.
what state is this in, though?
Oh, now so you said it's one of the most sought after places for yoga retreats.
And
Um,
this is, and I was only in one state.
So here's the deal. I have only I studied abroad in Costa Rica. I mean,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So I'm familiar with Costa Rica. Um, and so is this the capital, San Jose?
No,
Okay,
it
so
would
it's not
be north of San Jose.
north of San Jose. Okay. I'm not as familiar with that. So I'm familiar with like Nicaragua, kind of that direction. Let me see. States. So, and by the way, I believe it was the first episode that we did. I was also in Costa Rica. It may have been the first or the second episode.
So there are 8. Wait, is it 7 or 8? Punta Neras, San Jose, Cartago, Limon, Heredia, Aloea, and Guanacaste.
Okay, Guanacaste.
So technically, you are correct.
Oh, okay.
This is in the Guanacaste Peninsula,
Okay.
and the tree of Costa Rica is the Guanacaste tree.
Mhm.
This is not a Guanacaste tree, I don't think, but you got
Oh,
close. I feel like I'll just tell you what's going on here. How about that?
okay. Tell me what's going on.
This is called the Jesus tree. And
The
what
tree
you're
of life.
seeing, it's not the tree of life. It's called the Jesus tree. But check this out. So you notice that you had mentioned earlier on that there is, you're close to water.
Yes.
This is a rocky shore. This
Okay.
tree is growing out of the rock. It's the only tree in the entire area. There's an entire peninsula that it's just this one tree.
Wow.
And the tide comes in, and it comes in over the roots. So this tree grows in salt water, and you can't see it in this image, but there's these tiny little fingers that are coming up out of the stone so that when the tide comes in, it can absorb water above ground. Because the
Wow.
stone is so hard that it can't collect water underneath the stone. And when the tide comes in, it looks like it's walking on water.
Wow. So
Isn't
can you when you're seeing these roots, are they moving? Do you see them moving?
No, I mean it's not like that. They're just like they look like tiny little they're just like tiny little tree roots. They're just like they come out. They're not like worms, right? They're just like tree roots. But when you look closely at the ground, you can kind of see them, kind of here. It's a little
Yeah.
small, like at the very base of the tree to the left.
Okay.
Little,
Oh, I
little,
can see. Yes, like
it
little
kind of looks like
sprouts.
grass.
Yeah.
It kind of looks like grass, but they're actually these like little fingers that come up out of the ground.
That's incredible. And
It's
so
super, super cool.
it survived off of salt water.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, here, I want to,
And I guess
uh,
that's not totally surprising because there are so much vegetation that thrives in salt water. But when you think of trees, I don't typically think of trees as surviving on the salt water.
I wouldn't think so either. And I think that's part of the thing about it that makes it so like, that's interesting.
That is cool.
Um, I am seeing if I can find a different photo because, yes. Yeah, give me 1 second. I just want to share this photo because I think it's really pretty cool.
Okay.
Have you ever seen the show The OA by chance?
No, I have
Okay.
not.
Then I will just share this photo anyway because it's still a cool photo.
Netflix,
It
Hulu.
is on Netflix. It is one of the best shows I've ever seen.
Wow, that is high praise.
I agree. It is. All right, let's see if I can. How do I? Oh, wait, here we go. Virtual background. This part of the podcast is not very interesting.
It's okay.
Uh,
We'll work it out in post production.
Fix it in post, as they say.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me guess, you're at home.
I am at home.
Oh,
Okay.
is that
So,
you on the right?
yeah. So you can see here,
Oh,
it's kind of
that's
hidden by my name, but there's these pools of water. There's like these tide pools.
hmm
And you can actually get, I have another photo that's like a really cool reflection where it looks like it's sitting on its own reflection.
hmm
And my friends and I are standing on the peninsula and we're doing some of the movements from the show, The OA.
Okay.
And if you've seen The OA, that would make sense. But if you haven't, it's definitely worth watching. So anyway, this is just a really cool moment for us to get a chance to pose and have some fun, be weird.
Now, is this picture, this angle that we're looking at,
Mhm.
is this from the opposite side?
This would be from the land side. So
Right.
behind us, that's the ocean, kind of over here in the like
Gotcha.
underneath my legs. That's like the ocean.
So this is more as a zoomed out.
Yeah,
Wow.
zoomed out and lower down to the ground.
This is beautiful.
It's super cool.
Oh,
Sorry, my chair is taking up most of
thank
the.
you, Maxwell, for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Super fun journey that was going to Costa
Mhm.
Rica. By the way, the story of trying to find this tree was just absolutely ridiculous.
Mhm.
So probably not for this podcast, but another time. It's definitely an interesting story. We got lost like 6 times.
So you knew this tree existed, and so you went to find this tree specifically.
Yeah, it was like a journey. Like someone looked on their phone and they're like, "Oh, there's this like we're here for one more day. What should we do?" And someone's like, "Oh, there's this thing called the Jesus tree. Well, we should go." And we, like I said, we literally got lost 6 times. Our group got separated 3 different times trying to find it, and we
Mhm.
kept on finding each other again. Law of manifestation, because we were like, we're gonna find our friends. They're gonna show up.
They're
Like
gonna show
there
up.
they are. And so yeah, it was pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, it's not fair for me to guess, and then you still.
So you kind of gave me a hint.
I did.
I want to just take a rough guess here. When I asked, is it north of Hungary? You were like, it's not north of Hungary, nor is it east. Is it Hungary?
It is not Hungary.
Okay. I thought maybe just the way you answered that, I'm like, ooh, is that like a? It's
We are
not north of Hungary because
we are south of Hungary.
south of Hungary. Okay,
We are closer
um,
to Turkey,
got it. Okay,
and the flag of this country was designed by a poet.
by a poet.
By a poet.
Clary, come on, man.
I gave you 3 clues,
There are
okay?
so I know there are so
We
many
just
clues.
triage this, okay?
I'm trying not to Google this.
You have permission to
I
Google.
know. Ooze.
More than 350 monasteries. I told you the language. closer to Turkey, south of Hungary, not Russia, not
This is not
Ukraine.
helpful at all. Sorry. I'm like, come on, man. Okay. South of Hungary. Is this Serbia?
No, but you're bordering it.
I'm
But
bordering.
before you ask another question, I
Okay.
still have a couple questions for you.
Okay.
We're
Great.
here at the end.
Okay.
Okay, we're here near the end. So my next question for you, Maxwell, is how can young professionals like what are some practical steps young professionals can take to strengthen their thoughts and belief systems around success?
Ooh.
And
Uh,
how can they practice manifestation to create momentum in their careers?
that that's a tough one. I honestly think the short answer is
Oh, we need a background.
I'm putting back on. I think. Come on. Sorry. Where in the world is Maxwell? He's in his room. All right, save back on.
And we might have to hire you for our jingle.
Oh, I stole that from a show. Okay, there we go. Sorry. I was going to say that I think the best thing that you can do is start by defining what success means for you.
Hmm.
You know, just as a very basic level exercise. If you want to understand how you can find success in your life, you need to know what you're looking for, right? Beyond that, like if you, well, I guess I'll say this differently. If you don't know what success is, how will you know when you've gotten there? It's a never-ending treadmill. You know, if you just have, I want to be successful, and you have no metric, no measuring stick, you might have $100 million and not realize that you've made it.
Hmm. Those are some deep words,
Yeah, I know, right?
but also so simple and so true, right? And this is what, and it's so interesting that you say this because I had this conversation with a friend the other night about miracles and manifestation. And my comment was it's not a miracle unless you have the awareness that a miracle is happening. Unless you acknowledge that it's a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's just another occurrence in your life, right? If I manifest something, it's not really a manifestation until I acknowledge that, oh my goodness, this is a manifestation. Otherwise, it's just another job. Otherwise, it's just another opportunity, right? So we have to be in the present long enough to have that moment of acknowledgement of wow, what I'm experiencing is really special.
Hmm.
And so I think big part of it because so much of our thinking about career and our thinking about manifestation and success is the thing that we want is out there and I'm constantly chasing after it, right? And that's the journey is I'm constantly chasing this thing. And a lot of times what we don't realize is that we are already there. And it's that moment of realization that, whoa, I'm already here. I'm already wealthy. I'm already doing the thing that I love to do. I'm already in the job or in the role that I wanted to be in. It's in those moments where the miracle actually becomes a miracle. So I think what you said is so important is defining what success looks like so that when you get there, when it happens, you have that moment of realization and you can confidently step into it with gratitude because of course gratitude is such an important part of the manifestation, right?
Yeah.
um okay, so Maxwell, we've gotten you as close as Serbia.
Before we do that, I want to just share one more thing about success
Okay,
because I think this is a really important thing to kind of end on.
of course.
If I were to give an advice about success, it would be to understand that success isn't necessarily a dollar amount.
Mhm.
It's not necessarily a position, and it's not necessarily somebody else being proud of you. Success only happens when you realize that you're happy doing whatever it is that you are doing. It doesn't matter if you work a dirty job or if you work a corporate job or if you are at the top of the corporate ladder. If you're not happy doing what you're doing, then I would say that you're not successful, or at least you're not successfully living your life. So my advice for anyone who's listening, or anyone really, would just be, when you look for success, start here first. Start within what you are and what you have first. Because if you're looking for validation in some form of external thing, you're always going to find some level of disappointment. In fact, I'm going to quote Jim Carrey here because I actually really love what he said. He was on the stage of the Golden Globes doing an acceptance speech, and he said, "Here I am, not just Jim Carrey, the actor, not just Jim Carrey, the man, but here I am as Jim Carrey, 2-time Golden Globe winner. And what I really look forward to is being up here and being able to say I'm Jim Carrey, 3-time Golden Globe winner, because by then I'll know I've got it."
Hmm.
And it's like, I'll know I've made it, And he's joking, of course, because he's Jim Carrey. He already made it. But it's a great way to look at it, is if you're always looking for the next trophy or the bigger paycheck or the position, the title, validation from a family member or a friend, you're always going to be seeking for something that is external from you. And that is a really good way to not manifest what you want and what you want to create in the world, what you want to bring out of the world and bring into yourself. So that is my closing remark on that. And now I will vote the country that you're in.
Okay.
And I will guess correctly with my first guess.
Yes. Manifesting.
Let's see. I know what country you are in.
Yes. It's a very large country.
I manifest that you...
It is bordering
Bordering
water.
Serbia. And
It
it's
is
south of
bordering
Hungary.
Serbia.
I am guessing that you are manifesting that you are in Romania. No! Bulgaria?
Yes.
Bulgaria, okay. Dang it, 50-50 chance.
Specifically, I am at the sanctuary Belintash. Are you familiar with this?
No, I'm not. I've never even heard of this.
Oh, okay. Well, the sanctuary Belintash is on a rocky plateau, and it on the rocky plateau are outlined mirror projections of important parts of the star chart. In the area around Belintash and in it, there is a strong energy, and hundreds of people testify for a frequent paranormal phenomena.
Whoa. I should have known, because when I mentioned Raya earlier, Raya is from Bulgaria.
Okay.
So I should have just...
Hey, we made it.
We made it.
Here to the final question, which you kind of already answered, but I want to ask the question anyway, because we ask all of our guests this question. Maxwell, how would you describe success?
You're right. I kind of answered this, but I didn't really, right? It was like close to it. For me, success is... success isn't something that can really be defined, right? It's a feeling. It's like a knowing of maybe a sense of accomplishment or a sense of right. The people who I can say are the most successful are artists. I would say that people who do the craft of art for a living, those are the most successful people, in my opinion. Because as an artist myself, I look at them and I'm like, man, they are doing what they love. They're creating something worthwhile. They are doing something they're good at, and they're doing something they can be paid for. Going back to what you mentioned earlier, the Ikigai principle. So maybe success is those things. Success is if you can find a balance of doing what you love, doing what you are good at, doing what the world needs, and doing what you can be paid for, maybe then you've achieved success. Maybe.
And with that, folks, we've had Maxwell Darwin, the linguistic alchemist. And by the way, a very talented artist. I'm going to pop your collar for you. And I'm not just saying that because you are extremely talented as an artist. I have seen your work. It's detailed, it's intricate, it takes you on a journey. And I am so honored that you have agreed to join the show, to share your perspective, to enlighten us about what it means to manifest and to be successful and what it's like to work as a contractor and still find your way towards the career and the dreams and the desires that you want of your heart. And so, thank you, Maxwell, for coming on the show and sharing your perspective. And we look forward to connecting again in the future.
Thank you, Clary. Very much appreciated. It's been really great being on the show, and I'm glad to come back anytime.
Thank you, Maxwell. And with that, folks, good night.
Take care.